This is Jewish Genealogy 101 with Rabbi Jeffrey Schrager in Web Yeshiva's fall 2021 semester. Hi, everyone. How are you? We're not going to do the whole find out where everybody's from, because if we do that, it'll take forever. So we're not going to do that. Just want to make sure you're aware that if you have any questions, you please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to cover them as much as we can. So before even really diving in, I wanted to make sure, or I guess I wanted to communicate that this is, of course, this is a 101 class, I guess we would say, which means that it's somewhat of an introductory class. As such, if you're like really experienced in genealogy, we can talk about how you can sort of get the most out of this. But I wanted to make sure that that I kind of put that out there to begin with. Okay. Welcome to what is honestly my favorite topic in the world. My name is Rabbi Jeffrey Schrager. I have been doing genealogy for, I don't know, like 20 years maybe. Maybe. Probably more than that, actually. Oh my God, more than that. I have been teaching genealogy actually for maybe 15 years. In a lot of different contexts, and I think it's a kind of a neglected area of study, let's say. So what I would like to do, what I want to start off with, I guess, I want to ask why do you think, or why, like, what is your reason for wanting to do genealogy? Why do you want to learn more about doing genealogy? You could type it in the the chat. What interests you? You are giving up an hour of your time or so to hear about it. So why would you want to do genealogy in the first place? Because I'm a big believer that the more we understand why we want to do it, what we're in it for, the more, number one, we can come up with kind of clearer goals. But we can also get a lot more out of it. And I'm going to explain that part a little bit more. So I don't see anybody putting in that much. Want to know more about your family's history? Excellent. Fascinated who people are, what they went through, how it affects. It is so I agree. Those are pretty much the reasons why I got into genealogy. Awesome. This is it's so interesting. I work, as I said, I teach genealogy to a lot of different places, and I end up hearing like a lot of different things. There's some people, honestly, some people are in it because they want to find out scandalous family stories. That's like one reason that a lot of I teach teenagers. Also, I do genealogy with teenagers. One of the reasons I just started a class, and one of them said, "Are any of us going to find out that our father is not our father?" And I said, I certainly hope not, because then we're going to have a very uncomfortable situation. And thank God I've never had such an occurrence in my life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about generally why I think Jewish genealogy is important. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my particular genealogy, my journey. So the pasuk in Bamidbar says, "Ve'et kol ha'ida." This is the Jews are being counted by Moshe Rabbeinu. Ve'et kol ha'ida hikilu be'echad l'chodesh hasheni. Vayityaldu al mishpuchotam levet avotam v'mispar shemot miben 20 shana v'mala l'gulgalotam. So I once heard a shir by Rabbi Bravender, and he referred to this pasuk as being the most important pasuk in the Torah. It's also the one that nobody talks about, but he said it was, and as a genealogist, I got very excited. But this idea, the word that's off, so to speak, in this pasuk is the word vayityaldu. Because if we translate it literally, it means the whole congregation were gathered the first day of the second month, and they, literally this would mean, they gave birth to themselves according to their families and their fathers' houses, the number of names from age 20 and up, to their gulgalotam, we could say to their heads, to their whatever. The word that's really kind of like sets off some alarms is this word vayityaldu. They gave birth to themselves. So Rashi, picking up on that, Rashi says, what does it mean they gave birth to themselves? Heviu sifrei yichusehem. They brought, what did they bring? They brought their family trees. Ve'edei chazkat leidatam, and witnesses to talk about where they were from. Kol echad ve'echad lehityaches el hashevet. Each and every one of them to like connect them to a specific tribe. Now, if you have any experience in Jewish genealogy, you know connecting to a particular tribe is more or less a pipe dream. There are people out there who try, but it's pretty difficult. But this idea, so Rabbi Bravner, when he was giving the shir, he said that Vayityaldu, what happened was, this was the moment that the Jewish people identified as Jews. Meaning, the Jewish people had a choice. They could kind of like at this point opt out of Judaism. And the fact that they all opted in, or I guess I don't know if they all opted in, but the fact that the ones opted in that did, this was the moment when really the Jews became a Jewish people. And the way that they did that was by giving their family trees. And so for me, I can only speak for myself. That is kind of is my major motivation in a lot of ways in doing genealogy. Very briefly, I personally started getting interested in genealogy. I started getting interested in genealogy when I was in yeshiva. I was 18. The reason I got interested was because my grandfather, who I am named after, he passed away 9 years before I was born. My grandfather and my father did not get along very well. And when they did not get along very well, one of the results was, in fact, we had an occurrence today. A family member, my father's first cousin, who was the one who was from not the Schrager side, the Stern side, went to Argentina. And they were there. It was my bubby's sister went to Argentina, and their family is there. And she just recently passed away. Her daughter is there and is going through pictures. And so she keeps posting pictures. And one picture was posted, and I had to ask my father if it was my grandfather, because he was in the picture, first of all, with family, which I can only think of one other picture that he was with family members in a picture. And number two, he was smiling. And I said, like, I've never seen a picture with him smiling before. And my father said it was a rare occurrence. So I didn't know so much about my grandfather, and I wanted to learn more about where he was from. I was told he was from Austria, and that was just about it. It turns out, of course, that he probably wasn't from Austria. Not probably. I know for a fact he wasn't from like what I was looking for a long time in Vienna and Innsbruck. But he was certainly not from those places. He was from historic Austria-Hungary, so he was from Galicia. And so that the fact that he was from Galicia, it took me a while to figure out. but it also, we didn't have any family on that side, and I wanted to understand how this all happened. How were there ruptures in the family? How did, a lot of it was, how did I get where I am? I'm very big on choices in genealogy. So what we're going to be doing, this course on Web Yeshiva is over 4 weeks, I believe. So it's over the course of 4 weeks. And in those 4 weeks, we are going to be, hopefully, accomplishing the following. As I said, this is a, so to speak, 101 class. So we're going to be kind of starting from the ground up. We're going to be talking about thinking genealogically. I spent a very long time, I'll say, like, just kind of frantically trying to get as much information as I could, which did not serve me well. In fact, it kind of prevented me from making any progress. So we're going to talk about how to think genealogically. We're also going to talk about sorting through information, meaning how you look at records, how you, what you can do to kind of get the most out of records, thinking creatively with records. We're going to have one class on DNA. I don't know how many people, this is the new, all the rage in the genealogy world, and specifically in the Jewish genealogy world, is doing genealogy using your DNA, using DNA testing. We're going to talk about the limitations, etc. That's probably going to be class number 3, like our 3rd week. And we're going to look specifically, we're going to have one class, since this is, of course, Jewish genealogy, we're going to look specifically at Jewish genealogy research. How we do research, with Jewish records, what records are out there, what records are not out there. We're going to deal with a few common myths in genealogy, in Jewish genealogy, the most famous of which is that names were changed at Ellis Island. We'll touch on that one, which is always some people always react very strongly to it. I just seeing this question. I'm going to, please God, I will send slides out by email to those who are signed up for the class. I'll send them out after class. Maybe not, I'll say for sure, not immediately, but God willing, sometime later today. Okay. Okay. So the first thing I want to point out is that doing genealogy is, in my opinion, made up of 2 very distinct sets of information. One is data, that is like dates, names, relatives, etc., etc. And the other one is stories. And in my experience, people often go a little bit harder for the data, and they forget about the story aspect. I take it very personally because, honestly, I forgot, like, I don't have any stories of my grandfather's family. I finally, after maybe 10 years of trying to find people, I found the last surviving relative of my grandfather's generation. He's the one that I was really interested in. She lived in Cleveland. She passed away actually a few years ago. And she was able to walk me through my grandparents' house, their apartment. Not my grandparents, my great-grandmother's apartment, and describe the house in detail. So, and she added in the story, she added some details that actually made the data actually finally make sense. In the 1930 census, which we may look at actually that next class, but in the 1930 census, my family, my grandfather's family, his name was Jacob Schrager. His mother was Shandel Schrager. They owned, on the 1930 census, there was it took me forever to notice it, but one of the things on the census is it says R or O, whether you were renting a building, an apartment, or you owned it. So I had always kind of passed over the fact that there was an O. Now that O turned out to be very important. And I only kind of understood it or knew what was going on after speaking to this relative. She told this whole story, and she talked about how she was a little girl and she went to their house, and she said they owned the house. I had no idea how. We never knew because nobody seemed to do any work. That was one of her big things. Nobody worked. My grandfather's brother, Harry, of course, because there has to be a Harry in every family. So she said, I asked, did he do, like, what was his profession? She said, I'm pretty sure he didn't have a profession. She said, I never saw him doing anything except, she said, you're going to say I'm crazy and that I'm going senile. But I promise you, he taught their dog to talk. She said, and like, I was like, what do you mean? So she said, I'm telling you, I know it sounds crazy, but he taught the dog to say mama. And so she painted a picture of the family, which made sense of the fact that Harry very infrequently had a job. But then as she was walking through the apartment, she said, and then you went into the kitchen, and there was this big like basin on top of the counter, and I asked them what it was for. Like, I wanted to know what it was for, and they said it was a bathtub. So this is, of course, on the Lower East Side. So after a little while, after this interview, I kind of digested. I looked back at the records that I had already been staring at for years and years and years, and what kind of came from it was I am pretty confident, because then I followed up and went to the municipal archives in New York City. I am pretty confident that my great grandmother was essentially a slumlord who was making illegal alcohol during Prohibition, because as soon as Prohibition ended, they were foreclosed on. They didn't have any income anymore. So this story, meaning listening to the story, got me some more of that data. It helped me make sense of the data. But even more than that, the story that she told me is one of its, I think it's actually the only story about that branch of the family that I have, but it has become sort of a cherished story for me, meaning like I love it. So I always like to start by like by sort of I'm losing the word, by emphasizing, let's say, that we can never lose sight of those stories, and even more so, the importance of recording them. Record whether you have or have not yet. Record anyone you know who can talk about your family. In the olden days, we're going to talk more about how to do this in a few minutes, but record them, record yourself talking about it, anything you can do, because it's going to end up being the most valuable thing that you have. We have a tape of my mother's father talking about driving through Richmond, Indiana, which is where he grew up, with his uncle. And it's the most amazing thing. Okay. So that's what I like to start off when you consider how to do genealogy. The records are really important, but it's also really important that you talk to people. And the way you talk to people has to be very open-ended, let's say. I like to talk about, we refer to it as an oral history. If you have experience with taking oral histories or with watching them, the Shoah Foundation is a really good kind of example of how to take oral histories. I'm just going to run through, because there are a few points that I really want to hit on. One is record everything. This is so often people schmooze. They schmooze with family members, and they just kind of like, it just goes. If you put a tape recorder down, or a digital recorder now makes it even easier, you just put it down in the middle of the table while you're schmoozing. That recording will be huge. I didn't do this for many years, and I regret it ad hayom hazeh. I regret that I didn't record. So that's like my big thing is always record. Anything you can do to anything you could do to record. Starting with questions that you know are going to get a reply. Ask questions about like things that are like a story you've heard in the past. And this is another big one. A lot of, and I teach a very wide age range. One of the things that I frequently see is that people ask, they only want to know the data. So they want to know dates, names, places, etc. It is better, in my opinion, by far, to ask things that are not just yes/no questions. Ask questions about facts, feelings, stories. Meaning, can you tell me about? And this is again, if you're recording, even if you're recording yourself, instead of just saying, I was born da 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 da, talk about your first memory of going to school. What was Pesach like in your family? Things like that, because those end up being you learn all of the basic information. Plus, you have this. It's like I say, it's like the skeleton and the flesh of your family history, and the flesh is really it's critical. Use things like family heirlooms. In my family, it happens to be we don't have so many family heirlooms. The one thing, and somebody pointed it out a little bit in the chat. One thing I have found is that every story in my family is made up. Not just made up like we have there are these family heirlooms. One of them is a Kiddush cup. It's really actually the only family heirloom is a Kiddush cup that was from my bubby's grandfather. And the story goes that the silversmith came to their house to pour it for them right after they got married. So that was a story I always heard growing up. Unfortunately, I looked at the bottom where there's a silver mark, and I found out that it's not a particularly unique Kiddush cup, and that it was made pretty far away. It was in the Russian Empire when my family was living in Poland, and probably it's more likely that my grandfather got on like a business trip or something. So while the story isn't there anymore, so to speak, am I going to tell my kids the same story? Chances are I'll probably make reference to it. But going through family heirlooms, there are a lot of people who have. I always have students who they discover their great grandfather's shchita knife, and they get very excited. So having those sorts of things, like being able to demonstrate, essentially, I think it's a pretty big win for anybody who will ever see that recording. Talking to people about other relatives, Jewish families, in my experience, always have. I always say, Jewish families always have one branch that nobody else likes. And if you don't know which branch on that family tree is the one that nobody else likes, it's entirely possible that it's yours. And that's and I mean, there's always like the family member who everybody else says is Meshuggah. So that even so, one of the ways that I have found that you are able to sort of broach the subject with other family members is in doing family history research. My bubby's family had a big blow up a long time ago. Half the family didn't speak to the other half of the family for about 15 years. And when they had that blow up, I actually didn't know why. I knew that it existed, but nobody told me why there was a big blow up until a few years ago. Finally, they explained the other side of the story. My side of the story, my family side of the story, was that the other group, the other half of the family, were thieves and horrible. Then I heard the other side, and they, of course, thought we were horrible. So hearing those, being able to hear both those sides, actually can bring a little bit of healing, and that is if you don't push too hard. Some people don't like sharing, And so going crazy with getting people to tell you things is not always a good way to go. So just as a few topics to touch on, childhood is great, family. Again, not asking just name your siblings. Tell me which sibling were you closest with. Those sorts of things. Traditions. I just found out in the last 2 months. I just found out that my grandfather, who I'm again named after, my father's father, I just found out that he washed my machronim. And so now I've kind of, my father doesn't wash my machronim, and so I said, oh, maybe I'll start washing my machronim. So that becomes a whole issue too, because now, like, am I picking my grandfather or whatever? But I just found that out. But they're also minhagim, traditions in general, can teach us a lot about the people. I have a lot of students who, like, they bring like minhagim, like, my grandmother used to take a piece of the afikomen and put it above the door. And it would sit there all year. It would sit there above the door. Is that avodah zarah? And so I had to look up, like, where can it inform where that family or where that minhag, where that custom might have come from. What were things like growing up? Historical events. Everybody remembers where they were at certain historical events. JFK being shot, 9/11. I mean, I would say, like, we all remember where we were during the corona pandemic, but the answer is usually in our houses. So it's not as exciting, I guess. But in general, what your hometown was like, describe the Jewish community was like, especially. Any immigration stories, I think, are worth their weight in gold. Jobs, what they heard about previous generations, etc. Hearing those sorts of, usually if you ask like questions not frontally, meaning you don't ask like, tell me about X, you ask, I don't remember you mentioning X. You do it that way, frequently you get a better result. There's somebody in my wife's family, my mother-in-law, not my mother-in-law, my grandmother-in-law, my wife's grandmother. She should live and be well. She loves talking about her family, loves it. And there was one person in the family that she frequently skimmed over when we were looking at the family tree. And it turned out that it was because that person had maybe some encounters with law enforcement. And so sometimes you have to be a little bit aware of, by the way, there's a book, actually, there's a whole book, there's a whole field of Jewish genealogy. Somebody wrote a book called The Jews of Sing Sing. And that by itself, that whole field of finding potentially criminal people. Okay, I saw somebody in the chat talking about, where did you meet your spouse? Like, going into that story is so much more important than when and where did you get married. Okay, now this is the hardest part for me. By far, in my when we made Aliyah, we packed up all of our papers, and I found, in many cases, I found the same information written down on 6 different pieces of paper. Meaning, I had, for example, my grandfather's sister. My grandfather's family, everybody, like, nobody, they didn't have any kids ever. That was like a rule. The only one that had kids left the family, and so I had to track them down. That was a whole other balagan. But my grandfather's family, his sister, I didn't know where she was buried. So my aunt knew where she was buried. So I had, at least 3 times, I had written down exactly where she was buried. But I kept losing the piece of paper. So I could never go to I'm big on visiting graves of people who aren't visited anymore. So I didn't know where she was buried, because I kept losing the information. So for me, organization is really a big problem. So I'm going to touch on a few sort of options when it comes to organizing. It happens to be that I don't know how people did genealogy before. I'm going to be honest. I inherited on my mother's side. My mother converted, so genealogy in the non-Jewish world is 20 times easier. It helps when people aren't chasing you around trying to kill you. It turns out you can keep records a lot better. So my grandfather's brother, this is on the non-Jewish side, he was very into genealogy. I'm the other genealogist in the family, so I inherited all of his records. What that meant was I inherited a file cabinet a little bit bigger than this, with a file for each family member, for each branch of the family, all of the correspondence, meaning if he wanted a record, he had to write somebody. So I want to just go through. Nowadays, we have this digital records have made life so much simpler. I want to go through a little bit the options of how to build your family tree and how to get started, and that'll lead us into next week, really like looking at various websites. So the number one boom to genealogy, the genealogy world, has been online trees, being able to build your family tree online. It used to be you had to use paper. There was a whole system where this sheet went to the other sheet, and it was really, when you try to figure it out, it was insane. I don't know how anybody did it. I would have given up a long time ago, personally. Having online trees, so I just want to go through very quickly the options. Okay, the options are, the first one, and to be honest, this is the one that I use the most, is Ancestry.com. They have great advertising. I appreciate their interface. That you do have to pay for it. You have to pay to get the records. You don't have to pay to build a tree, but you have to pay to have access to the records. Their records are usually really extraordinary. It's usually pretty user-friendly also. A lot of researchers. Why is this important? It's important because choosing where you have your family tree up affects who else can find your family tree. And so a lot of the time people get kind of like zoned in on one, like they're only working on Ancestry, and the result is that anybody who's using another source can't access it. So what a lot of people do is they actually use all of them. They'll have one that they use as their primary, and then they keep records on their other ones. MyHeritage also costs money. One of the big advantages to MyHeritage is that it is an Israeli company. It was founded by Gilad Yafet, or Jafet is his name, I believe. I met him once, but I don't remember exactly how he spells it. He founded this company. It has grown to become a huge company. I think they were, if I remember correctly, they were purchased. They had an agreement to be purchased last year for some number of billions of dollars. But MyHeritage, one of their big emphases is that they want to help you with your research. So if you start off your family tree, they want to kind of like help you build your tree as fast as possible. Now, personally, I don't always feel as comfortable with that because I like experiencing the records, meaning I don't want to know what the 1930 census says. I want to see the page. I get a thrill out of seeing like the original document scanned, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can do that on many things on MyHeritage. You can do that. I just don't. I don't find it quite as user friendly. And so even though I frequently want to use MyHeritage, because it, as I said, is Israeli, I can't always make it work. And then another option is Family Search. Now you notice that there's no $sign. That's because Family Search is free. Family Search has a lot of good records. The reason they have a lot of good records is because they don't offer you help, meaning they don't say like, oh, we think this tree matches with someone else. The other, I'll say, downside is that Family Search is a branch of the Mormon Church. I don't think they like being referred to that way anymore, but fine. It's a branch of the Mormon Church. Mormons, for those who don't know, the two groups that are the most excited about genealogy are Jews and Mormons. Jews, I've heard a lot of theories as to why. Mormons, because they believe that they can baptize. I actually lived down the street when we lived in Dallas. We lived down the street from the Dallas Temple, and supposedly you can't get in you can't get into a Mormon temple unless you have a license. You need like a permit to get in, like a signed by the head of the church. So you supposedly they have what amounts to a mikveh, and a name comes up on the screen, and the person can baptize themselves in place of the deceased person. They get into trouble occasionally, especially when they start like accidentally, whether you believe it's an accident or not, baptizing people who died in Auschwitz. Like they've had some problems with that in the past. I'll touch on Beta Soda in a second. But they also have phenomenal records. And it happens to be they also have phenomenal Jewish records. One of the bonuses of the Mormon Church is that they're very good. They have a lot of volunteers because it's required that you volunteer for them for a year at least. So one of the things that they did is they sent people out all over the world, and they microfilmed records. So there are a lot of Jewish records from shtetls in the middle of nowhere in Poland that we only have because they microfilmed all of it. And it happens to be they're right now in the process of putting all of those records, the originals, online. They haven't been indexed. We're going to talk more about indexing. I'll mention it briefly now. To index records, they have a digital image, the picture of the record itself, and then there is a person, and you can actually volunteer to do this. And I encourage, especially when it comes to Jewish records, there are a lot of different places that you can do it. We'll talk about it in the fourth class. You can help index, but a person looks at the record, the original image, and types in the information into a database, and that makes it searchable. So it happens to be, if you haven't already, even if you've been working with records for a while, if you go on to Family Search, there are several books of Jewish records that are online. Like your town could be online. It's just not indexed yet. So you can't search it, but you can look page by page by page through a particular book. So some people feel uncomfortable using it because it's affiliated with the Mormon Church. I believe I've heard stories. I've never been there. I know people who have, but they have the Granite Mountain Library is basically this big library, this big mountain in Utah that is hollowed out, that is just all of their family history records. I've never been there. It sounds like a place I would go for fun, to be honest. But that's what they say is there. And the last place is Genie. Genie is free. You can add people. In order to access any records, though, Genie is owned by MyHeritage, so you have to pay for a MyHeritage membership. So what a lot of people do, and this is speaking to the organizational side, what a lot of people do is they will build their tree on Ancestry or MyHeritage, and then upload their tree onto Genie. And it's because that has kind of become, in a lot of ways, that's what's popular for to sort of centralize the information. There are a lot of advocates of Genie right now because it's free and because it's collaborative, meaning you can work with other people to build family trees. And of course, one thing that we'll point it out in next class, but one thing that's very important to remember is that there's a difference between records and other people's family trees. You can find somebody could have this really wonderful family tree, but if a family tree, I'll say it this way, a family tree is only as good as the researcher. If the researcher is just adding people willy-nilly, I found myself on. It was actually my father-in-law's family. I found them on somebody's family tree. It was actually somebody that that I went to high school with. I found them on their family tree. Mazel tov. The problem is, it was because they had just added people without being careful, and the result of that was that they didn't really their tree wasn't good, and so if I would have relied on it, it would have been a problem. I just answering a few questions in the chat. The information is easily transferable once you learn how to do it. Essentially, all genealogy websites operate on a file type which is called GEDCOM, GEDCOM, and at each of these places, Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Search, and Genie, all you can download and upload a GEDCOM. So if you have the file of your family tree, you can essentially put that any family tree. There are several other places you can put a family tree, but all of them, you can post them with relative ease. It's usually just 3 or 4 clicks maximum, and you're good to go. It doesn't necessarily take all of the records with it, but it will take all of the people, dates, places, etc. Up there also I saw, I addressed that, there are mistakes on trees. So Beit HaTfutzot, or the Anu Museum, they've now rebranded, I think, 3 times in the last 15 years. They were the Museum of the Diaspora, then they went to the Beit HaTfutzot, the Museum of the Jewish People, and they just in the last year or two became Anu. So they have, I'm trying to be diplomatic, and I don't think they have not done a phenomenal job as of yet. I believe they will now. They haven't done a perfect job of organizing their information. I think it's gone through a lot of hands. The vision has changed multiple times, and as a result, they don't always have it. They don't always have the information ready to go. Down the line, I think, and I have said this to them, to people there, and I hope that they will listen one day. Down the line, I hope that Beit HaTfutzot, or Anu, becomes the sort of the place for Jews to go to do Jewish genealogy. I don't know that it's there yet, but down the line, it will. Now, I see in the chat some people are referencing like Yad Vashem, etc. We're going to talk about that, I think, in the 3rd class when we talk about specifically where to find Jewish records. I'm talking about places to build a family tree. Yad Vashem, as far as I know, doesn't have you can't build a family tree at Yad Vashem. What you can do is you find names, especially. The names database is their biggest genealogy tool. The U.S. Holocaust Museum also has a similar resource, which again we'll talk about probably in the 3rd or 4th. I haven't decided the order. We'll really be getting into that. Okay, and then I saw somebody else pointed out, Jeannie, also you have a problem with people who they knit together families that are not related, and you have a lot of people. I don't have very good Jewish genealogy, meaning I don't have a lot of people on my family tree because there just aren't that many people, and so all of my hints that come up on Jeannie are like, it happens to be they're all my wife's brother's wife's family. She's from Muncie. They have like good yichus, and so somebody did a lot of stuff there, and it's all crazy. I said that I don't think the Anu resources are not yet very well organized. And in terms of programs used on computer, I don't use a program on a computer anymore. I used to. I think I used Legacy, which is connected to Ancestry, but a lot of the a lot of the programs for computers have kind of pushed towards doing a lot more research online. They want everything to be online. Anu is spelled A-N-U. I think it may be, you could also search Beta Tutsot. I imagine it'll come up. I'm not positive what, they've put a lot of effort into their the brick and mortar building at Tel Aviv University. I honestly haven't been there, which is, I'm embarrassed because I'm also a tour guide. So like I'm a genealogist and a tour guide, and I haven't been to but I haven't been there. They opened during Corona, so I haven't been there since they reopened. But if you search for Beta Tutsot, you might be able to find things. You can also, if you contact me later, or I'll include it if there's interest. I'll make sure to include it in future classes. We'll cover what they have to offer. Okay, good. So those are the basic options you have for where to get started. When you're looking for information, and as you start to sort of like think about how to organize yourself, you're looking, right? The brick and mortar is BMD, birth, marriage, and death. Those are the three big things people look for. We also look for when are children born, place of residence, et cetera, and all of those things together. That's what allows you to build a hypothesis, right? That's when you can start kind of like I can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that my grandfather's family were bootleggers, but I have a pretty good base of evidence. And we'll talk a little bit more next class. We're going to talk about how to decide whether records are applicable, et cetera, et cetera. So just a few tips as we're moving forward. Number one, I said be organized. I find using Family Tree, using those online things has helped a lot. The only problem is you have to enter the information. So aside from my online, it happens to be I have right here. I have my genealogy box right next to the desk, and in that, I mean, basically, I have folders broken up by family name, etc., for paper records. I also try to scan records, and I have like organized on my somewhat organized. I'm not very good at the organizing part, as I said, but I have like you organize digitally. You organize by family, etc. So I find that those kind of have worked for me generally. I have to get better at it because my wife pointed out that my wife said that someday I have to tell everybody, because right now I have all of this stuff in my head, and I need to make sure that I tell people. I'm a little worried that means that she's plotting something, like she wants to make sure I tell people so that she can off me, but hopefully that's not the case. So good. Record everything. Keeping trees updated. This is also a very difficult one because, as I already said, really they're the three main platforms: Ancestry, MyHeritage, and Genie. So having those available, having your updated family tree on all of those can be very beneficial. And the last thing is making a to-do list. I'm going to as I said, in one of the future classes, I'm going to be sharing it. Like I'll send it out and everything. Somebody finally, I don't know how it took this long. Somebody finally made, I think it was called the Taxonomy for a Jewish Genealogist, which was a list of every record that possibly exists for a person. And there are records in it that you might not have even thought of as records. For example, I actually didn't think of it until relatively late. You're a little bit crazy about genealogy when you're dreaming it. So I had a dream one night that I found information on my grandfather, the one that I've been researching a lot, that I got his report card from school. And when I woke up in the morning, I said, "Oh my God, I've never thought to look for his report card from school." So I happened to, my father knew which school he went to in New York City. I contacted them, and sure enough, this really wonderful woman in the registrar's office was very excited that she got to go down into the basement to make copies of the records for me. There was a hurricane in the middle. She still did it for me. It was really like, you meet the most wonderful people. You never know who you're going to call, and they're going to be the most generous person. Who, she didn't charge me. She actually called me after the hurricane to make sure that I knew that she was still on the case. It's extraordinary what it like gives you a little bit of faith in humanity. So making a to-do list, and as I said, I'll share this list of records that are out there. Being able to just go through and check off for each person, like, oh, for this person, I have their entry into America. I have this census, this census, this census. I have their birth record. I have that. Like, being able to do that, going through in that organized way, can really make it more systematized, which means that you're not like, you don't miss anything. Okay. And as I said, next class, we're going to talk about different strategies for finding things. So probably I'm going to send out this taxonomy this week. And then for the next class, we'll go through some of it to make sure we can kind of work through it. Okay. That is going to be it for today. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat. Point about keeping track of what you searched for, even if you don't find something, so you know not to look there again. It's true. The only issue is sometimes I have found things by doing the search repeatedly, meaning like I find it. MyHeritage, one of their newer features is that they actually tell you if other people are searching for things that you're searching for. I don't know. So good. Questions? Any questions would be, please type them in the chat. We are going to be same time, same channel. Oh, I forgot at the beginning to apologize for the change in time. I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but it shifted an hour. That was completely my fault, and I apologize. But if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to contact me. My email should be on the screen right now. Oh, it's not. I'm putting it up now. My email is up there. I respond better to email at that address. If I don't know, I put my WhatsApp, but if you don't need to, it's whatever. If I don't respond to it, don't get offended, because email's better generally. And as I said, I'm going to be in the next few classes, we're going to be addressing some of these sort of, we're going to go deal with these strategies of the actual sort of meat and potatoes, DNA, and then we'll also have, we'll focus on Jewish records, which is basically, we're going to talk about Jewish Gen, which is a whole balagan by itself. Okay. It's all going to be this hour earlier. I don't know wherever you are, it's 6 to 7 Israel time. Okay. I really appreciate so many people being here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I will see you next week. You will. Somebody just put in this question. You should be able to pick up from where you left off on Ancestry. Be well, everyone.